Welcome to Practical Healthy Living, Melissa. You described yourself as being raised in a family setting of Pennsylvania German art folk artists, but you were also formally trained in London as an experimental printmaker. How would you describe Melissa Strawser art now to our audience?
Hello, Alan. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much. I'm very grateful that you are having me on the program today. And Melissa Strawser art. I enjoy serving men and women a mystery in self-discovery with art. My art, I think, is my own, I'd say, eagle's eye or perspective on how I see the world and how I see other cultures. And it really has developed, and I've put in a lot of personal improvement and development over the years of in my practice as an artist. And I feel like my work has evolved to being a lot about the fantasy of that folk life kind of world, and also it has a lot to do with intuition and memory and milestones.
Okay, great. You know, before the show came on, we were talking a little bit, and I was telling you that we've done a couple of art shows on Practical Healthy Living, but sometimes people ask, well, you know, what is a psychology-focused program exploring art for? And I try to explain to people that, you know, art is so important to be able to express yourself when there's things that you're dealing with inside, and you're trying to get them out to be able to address those and look at those. And sometimes people don't have the abilities to express themselves, and we really rely on artists. So you play such an important, crucial role, because sometimes when an artist creates something and someone looks at it and they say, yes, this is how I feel, this is what I'm feeling. Are you aware of that dynamic at all?
Yes, I feel that my artwork is very expressive and it's very healing, and I very much enjoy to help men and women find their natural emotions in art. And I had an experience over the weekend that I can share with you. I donated a piece to a silent auction, and we went along to the silent auction, and it was a wonderful function to raise money for a summer, like one of the oldest summer theaters. And I noticed this couple kept going back to my artwork because the things were on display where people could place their bid. And I noticed this couple, and I went up to them on their second return to my piece, and I said, would you be interested in meeting the artist who made this piece? And their face just lit up, and it was a magical moment for me, because I typically am very shy, and I will not approach people when they're privately in there, you know, enjoying something. But I just thought, you know, I just want to talk to these people and see. And it turned out that they had come there specifically because they had seen my artwork, and it had spoke to them. And when I talked to them and we shared the story behind the artwork, it was as if I could feel their emotions attached to my artwork. And as I walked away, I wished them the best to, you know, place their bid, and they did get it. But it was a wonderful exchange, and it was a wonderful, I want to say, reward for me to just meet complete strangers who could have an emotional attachment to something that I made. And it's, you know, it is something that is, I think the arts are speak to people in ways that are so healing, and you never really know what somebody's story is, or what their struggles that they've gone through. And when you can reach them in that way, it's really what life is all about.
You kind of go from being strangers to having a very intimate experience together.
That's right.
Now you've merged the traditional with the experimental in your work in a lot of ways. What is experimental printmaking versus just regular printmaking? Is there a laboratory involved? Is your work a fusion of these two disciplines, or do you keep them separate?
I love your question, Alan. Thank you so much. There should be a laboratory involved for experimental printmaking, and I hope and pray someday that there will be. And I know of some people who are working on that side of things. Traditional printmaking for me is the foundation and the grounding, and it is. I think of Durr's rhinoceros, and I think of Goya's disasters of war. And the traditional can be very rigid. It could be just very stifling, I think, to an artist. And experimental takes that foundation into a whole different way of making art. And the art of printmaking really relies on mark making and creating a mark that could just be moved around, or it could just be repeated as is. And the experimental just really allows an artist to work in a very expressive, natural way.
You've said that you serve mystery and self-discovery through your art. What do you mean by that, and how do you accomplish that?
Well, what I mean by that is that the mystery and the self-discovery is really how people can find their natural emotions in the artwork. And when you're making an artwork, so much of your feeling and so much of your emotion is being placed into that. And it's also the human touch. You're touching your artwork. And I was actually thinking about it this morning, and I was thinking, I've made several pieces that were commission based for people, but they were commission based on where they would let it up to me of how I was going to create something. And I remember when you're in those final moments of you're cleaning something and you're really refining it and you're finishing it and you're going to pass it off to someone, there's that exchange of energy that goes. It's almost like sometimes you miss the piece when you release it off to somebody, but then you see the joy, or you see their emotion. And I've had many experiences with many people to share that exchange of an emotional charge that is, it's healing for both parties, really.
It appears that you've also been involved in metalworking. Can you describe how that has influenced your genre of work?
Metalworking, in comparison to printmaking, is I say it's spherical. So it's working in the round, it's working three-dimensional, where printmaking is two-dimensional. And the way in which I learned about metalworking or working in a sculptural way was when I was very young, started art school. I took a sculptural class and we were going to weld, and I thought, my goodness, this isn't really something that I would ever be interested in doing. This isn't something that I think I can do. And we were given paper to create these three-dimensional objects before we went into metal. And I worked in steel, and steel is a very difficult metal to work in. And I actually still have that sculpture that I made. It was the best welding of the whole class. And the instructor was an Italian man. He took my hands and he said, these are the hands of a working artist. And it stuck with me my whole life. And I was in awe with what I did with welding and with metal. So it stayed with me for a long time. And it also challenged me. And the piece that I had, I kept. I never sold it, and I placed it in my mother's garden so that it would always be there when I would visit her. And it created this incredible patina over the years, and I have it to this day. So that's a nice thing.
I'll watch episodes of Forged in Fire, and it's very rarely that a woman will appear on that show. So I'm thinking that when you were first learning these skills, you were probably a minority as a woman doing this. Did you ever get any pushback for that?
No, and I never really gave it too much thought because I also went to the sculpture studio when I worked in London, and I had ideas of what I wanted to do and things, but I like welding is or brazing, I should say. It takes lots of practice, lots of practice. But there's something about I feel very razor focused when I'm able to follow the light. So a welder will follow the flame, or they'll follow the light. And I think that I never really considered, being a female, using a welding torch. I kind of like the Rosie of the 1960s. I don't know. It was just when I'm driven to do something, I have that 80% psychology in me always working. Like I know I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And my grandmother told me, years ago that she thought that I got the metalsmithing from her father, who worked in blacksmithing or it worked in iron. And who knows, who knows where your DNA really comes from, or your abilities, or that, and also that self-discovery, going back to that, you never really know what you're good at until you try it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You were trained in England in the printmaking. How is it that a woman from Pennsylvania ended up in London?
Well, I decided growing up or being raised in a family setting of folk artists, I decided I wanted to know what it would be like to be trained. I don't think any artist needs to be trained, but I wanted to know what it would be like to go to an art school. And I wanted to learn how to make things. And printmaking spoke to me very early on in my life. And when I fell in love with printmaking when I was 19 years old, because it took my mind and the mind of somebody who thinks in reverse, and it said, here's a place for you, and here's a place where you can spend the rest of your life, and you never have to retire in this world of printmaking, because it's going to take you forever to actually really master any of this. And I was intrigued by that. So I started to look after people like Robert Blackburn in New York City. And then I ended up being very privileged in getting a full scholarship to go to England. And then that planted the seed in me. It planted the seed in me to find those in England, because I felt England and Germany were the top places to learn printmaking. They're the best printmaking. So when I received this scholarship to go to England, I started to look up people like Bartolomeo dos Santos and Stanley Jones. And one day, this is how this girl from Pennsylvania gets to go to England. I was applying to Pratt and Parsons and the California Institute of Art. I was applying to do a master's, and my portfolio was about this big. It was not anything for anyone to even look at. And I didn't really have the financial freedom to keep putting these applications out and putting them into the mail. So I thought, I'm done doing this because this isn't going to work. So I quit my job that I was doing. I bought an airplane ticket because I had already completed my first year in England, and I had come back to America, and I had completed my first year on the scholarship. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to go back to England for 6 months, and I'm going to research the best people to work with in to do a master's in printmaking. And I'm going to do my homework. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and he was to this day, we're very, very good friends, and he's a fountaineer. And I went back there, And I picked up the phone one day and I called this man at University College London at the Slade School, Barto DeSantis. And I said that I wanted to pursue my life in printmaking, and that I was visiting from America, and da, da, da. He didn't even let me finish the sentence. He said, "Can you come and see me tomorrow at 10 o'clock?" And I went to the university at 10 o'clock that next day to see him with this little portfolio that really didn't mean a whole lot. And he took me up into that department, and I looked around and I thought, you know what? I could see myself working here for 2 years. He said, you'll have your own studio to work in. You will have all of us as professors to feed off of. And he showed me everything. And then he sat me down and he looked at me and he said, "I'm going to accept you on the spot." He goes, "I only accept 10 people per year on our course." And he goes, "But you only have one more obstacle to get through. And that's that you need to go back to America now and raise the money to come back and do it." And I thought, oh my goodness, I got over the hardest hurdle that he accepted me. But just being given that acceptance letter and having that was the most incredible thing in my life. It really did something for me. So I feel that Barto, I worked with him for 17 years. I learned my craft through him. He was my mentor. He was my friend. He was an incredible printmaker. And I worked alongside of him later on in his life. And before he passed on, I said to him, I had changed the color of his acid. I changed it. We were etching, and his acid was always this beautiful color. And there I am with my plates doing what I'm doing. And his acid bath had gone fluorescent green after I had placed my plates in there. And that evening, he didn't say a word. And that evening we were going to friends of his for dinner. And I said to him, I said, I am so sorry, Barto. I said, I feel like I'm your worst nightmare. I said, I am so sorry what I did to the your etching bath. And he looks at, and he said, I said, I must be your worst nightmare. And he said, darling, he said, you are the greatest dream. He said, you created in my etching bath something called a Dutch mordant, which is an etching bath that is the most incredible for any etcher to work with. And at that moment in time, I felt like I was working alongside somebody, and I was working alongside my mentor, as opposed to, working, some people you work against things or you work, but I felt like I was walking the path alongside of him. And it was a real turning point in my life as a printmaker. And I produced a lot of work after that moment.
Turned out to be good chemistry.
Oh yeah, real good chemistry. I actually, to this day, use a Dutch mordant to do all my etching.
I have to ask you, you said that you had to go back to the United States and raise the money.
Oh yeah.
That doesn't sound like a small feat. How did you do that?
And that was the hardest thing that I ever did. I actually was looking through a file recently because I probably wrote to every body that was a funding body out there asking to support me. And I got more no's than I got yeses. I got all no's actually, because I didn't fit into a category that was like, possible. And so I was working a job in New York City for Walt Disney, and I was working in publishing. And I remember telling the publishers there that I got this acceptance letter, that this is what I wanted to do. They thought that this was like the most amazing. They were so supportive. They thought that this was a must. I had to do this. And I'd say a month before I was supposed to go, And I was still in my mind believing that I was going to go, even though I didn't have the finances to do it. I was believing it. And I believed with all of my heart. And I was very close to my grandparents and my great grandparents and my great grandfather and my grandfather. I was fortunate enough to work with while I was in art school, and I would come back to Pennsylvania and work in my grandfather's workshop. And my great grandfather, we became where I would make drawings and I would send them home, and then he would make drawings and send them back to me. And I had come home one weekend, and I was given I felt like I was given a calling. I was giving a message, and I decided I was going to make up this beautiful little parcel for my great grandfather and take it to him. And it was flowers from my mother's garden. It was chocolate, which he loved. And I put it in this old cigar box. And I told my mom, I feel this pull. I have to go see my great grandfather, who we called Grandpop. And I went to see him. And when I went to see him, he passed away with me. And as he passed away with me, and he was in his 90s, he was 94. And as he passed away with me, it was my first experience. I was in my 20s, my first experience of losing or death. And I realized that I had to now carry this to my grandfather and tell him that his father had passed away. And I did this whole thing. And the funeral happened. It was a beautiful experience. There was fire, gunfires going off. He was a veteran. He was a firefighter. He was a wood carver. He was loved by his community. He was loved as a folk artist. And I then went back to my life in New York City, and I found myself stumbling around, and all of a sudden I'm at my Walt Disney job, and my phone rings. And I pick up the phone, and it's my grandmother. And my grandmother says to me, "Your grandfather would like to speak to you." Now I was 26 years old, 26, 27. My grandfather never spoke on the phone. My grandmother did all the speaking on the phone, but my grandfather never spoke on the phone. So I had never had an experience of speaking on the phone with him. And he gets on the phone with me, and he says to me, "I understand that you have been given something that is very important to you, and that's an acceptance letter to go to England to do a master's degree in printmaking." And I said, "Yes." I said, I want to go. I want to do this so bad. I said, "But I don't really know how I'm going to figure this all out." And he said, you have touched all of our lives in so many ways." He said, "Your great grandfather has left an inheritance for me." And he said, "I would like to give you some of that money to just get on that plane and go over there and do what you would like to do." And to this day, let's fast forward that. Before my grandfather passed away, he came to me and he said, he said, "You've been the greatest investment in all of our lives." And I was so touched by that. So, it's like generations passing things on and moving the needle and letting things go forward. Like nothing in society was going to stop me from this acceptance letter. Was the most important thing to me in my life. And it was not easy going to England at all. At that time, it was the 90s. But boy, I really loved everyone that I got to work with. I loved the personal improvement that came with all of that. I felt like an ambassador of my own country. And how was I that privileged to? And I felt like I had the power of my family and my footsteps when it came to making art.
That's a lovely story. I think
you.
that you've also received training in Germany and Portugal.
Not so much Germany and Portugal. The training really came from University College London at the Slade School. And then through that was Barto had then retired after 40 years of printmaking, and he loved working with his students. So he created a printmaking, a Tavira print workshop in Portugal, where he was from, and he would invite students to come there. So I was privileged to go and work there with him after that experience at the Slade. And I then got introduced to his printmaking artist friend, and who also had a gallery in Germany. And then I, followed in those footsteps through Barto to show at that gallery in Germany. And that was wonderful.
Fantastic. Melissa, we have to take a break here, but we will be back in just a few seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back to On Topic, a part of Practical Healthy Living. Today we're talking to Melissa Strawser. Tell us, Melissa, you have a new addition to a series of works called Sight Unseen, Unspoken Mystery Art, Prints or Mystery Print Subscription 2022, I think it is. Can you describe what this series is and how it started, and how could our audience become involved in that?
Sure. I was raised in a family setting where I was very close to my grandparents, and to celebrate milestones, whether they're big or small, was something that they really aspired to in their lives. And as folk artists that they were, they really touched a lot of people's lives. And I thought, I had an experience of, within the past 3 years, of losing both of them. And when my grandfather, when we lost him, I just thought to myself, I'm kind of looking up in the sky, and I'm seeing clouds, and I kept images of the eagle kept coming into my mind, and I would see them different things. And I just thought, what could I do that would bring a whole lot more meaning to, and just be really meaningful to what I do? What could I do for others that would make me always remember my grandparents, make me always celebrate milestones? And I came up with something called the Mystery Print Subscription. And the Mystery Print Subscription, I'm in my 3rd year of it. And it basically is, I'd like to think of it as an invitation to buy sight unseen art. So people who've never bought art before, they can afford $30 or $35 a month to get this very special piece of artwork in the mail. And I call it the unspoken, and meaning they're narrative art prints. They tell a story, and it's almost like unpuzzling. You're unpuzzling a bigger picture. So at the end of the year, you get a full artwork by Melissa Strawser, and it's a print, but it's in 12 pieces, and so it's being put together month by month. And I find it so fun to do this, because there's certain people that have their personalities will just raise their hand right away and say, oh yes, I want to do this. This sounds so exciting. It's so fun to me. And there's other people that will just be like, there is no way possible on this planet that I could ever buy anything that I do not know what it looks like. And I love this, because it just, it creates conversation, it creates these conversations. Plus, it puts something in the mail that is missing in our lives. Remember those handwritten letters that we would get? And I mean, I saved every single handwritten letter that has ever come my way. And they were the most precious things. And so it's kind of put that element back into it, but it's also a way for people who are very seasoned collectors, and then people who are amateurs. They've never bought a piece of artwork, and it creates it's a wonderful experience. It's a wonderful experience that I share this with my daughter as well, because she's part of the process of maybe packaging up the envelopes, or, looking at the print as I'm making it. And it also gives that self-discovery, or that way of people's natural emotions. They're almost getting the experience of what I get while I'm making it, because they're getting that artwork in the mail through this mystery print subscription. And at the end, I'm seeing an image for the first time too. They're seeing it completed, but I am as well. So it's a wonderful thing. And I'm so grateful that I can remember my grandparents in this way by offering something like this.
I think this is like a fascinating way of marketing your art. It reminds me of the Harry Potter series. You have this wonderful book. You're going to buy the next book because it's a body of literature, and this is kind of like a body of literature, only it's art, and you get it. You only have to wait till next month to get the next episodes.
Right.
It's a wonderful thing. I believe that you've written a book, Melissa. Can you tell us what's the name of the book and what is it about?
Yes, sure, Alan. The name of my book is Folk Art, and it's generations of the women artists. So it is the Pennsylvania traditions, the art of folk art. And I almost look upon it, it's the start of something else. And it also, I feel like it was a recipe book that I wrote for my 8-year-old daughter. And it is showing her the lineage of the women artists that are part of our family. And I'm 4th generation, which makes my daughter 5th generation. And this book, there's always a lot of attention given to the men in our family, the art in the arts, the over auction or whatnot. And I just thought, well, there has to be some kind of tradition that's placed upon the women, because the women are the ones in our family who maybe made the choices for what was going to be sold as the artwork, or maybe made the choices for what shows were going to be made the choices for pretty much everything. So I did it as a tribute after my grandmother passed. My grandmother was a centenarian. She was 100 years old, and we lost her in April. And I did it. I did it because I had, when I was in England, I wrote a thesis, or I did a master's on everyday art, which really had to do with kind of the fine art or the traditional, and then those folk arts, and kind of how you merge those two together through printmaking, or Frocht, or what we know as the Pennsylvania German way of what was done at the Ephrata cloisters, and through the Martyr's Mirror, and the lineage of the Mennonites and the Amish and whatnot. So this is like the start of what I could see going into maybe another book about everyday art, or about the folk arts. And so I'm really pleased with it, and I was really excited about it. It's sold a few copies so far, and it's gone into some really great hands of people, and I'm getting really wonderful feedback about it. So I'm really pleased.
If people were interested in getting a copy, how would they go about doing that?
Oh, they could just go to www.melissastrawserart.com, and you can find it, I think, right on my page.
Excellent.
To purchase it. Yeah.
What other projects are you currently working on?
Oh, I have many projects. So the one project that's the most exciting is I'm actually in the process of about to print the largest etching that I've ever done. And it's 45 inches by 30, yeah, 45 inches by 33 inches, something like that. It's on, it's an etching of, it's layering of trees. It's something I think about. I saw it's COVID or it's COVID. It's tomato or tomato. I kind of like look upon it like that. When you have a crisis like we've had, you either become creative or you get crushed. And in my, I think it's 80% of psychology that, like, when something tragic happens or there's a struggle or there's a crisis, I get really creative. So my creativity got really put into this piece of metal, and it is the layerings of different trees, and it's kind of, I want to call it the tree gong, but on top of it, it'll play sound. The gong will play sound. It will be an etching. I call it a diptych, but it's a huge project because it involves not only just myself, it involves more people. There's somebody who needed to make the paper. There's, by the name of Doug Zuka, who makes this gorgeous handmade paper nearby. Then I'll need, extra sets of hands to lift it on and off of a printing press. And there's a lot involved. So that's one project, and it's very near to completion. So my
Sounds
goal is
absolutely fascinating.
my goal is before the end of the year. And the other project is that the mystery prints, we could go back to that. Mystery prints, the mystery print subscription is its thing, but I offer these mystery prints because I'm creating a collection of the etchings that I've done over the years. And I've had a goal for a very long time to work with a collaborative printmaker. And so I will be getting the opportunity to work with somebody by the name of Phil Sanders, who is a collaborative printmaker, a master printmaker. And that, having that opportunity is just, it's like the next step for me. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then the third project that I have is, when my daughter was born, I started something called the Young Printmakers Workshop, which was a workshop for early learning education in children to learn how to really how to make it's an art workshop, but really it's more than that. It's cognitive, it's math, it's science, it's a little bit of everything, and they're just absorbing it. So my daughter could now run these workshops on her own, but my goal for this is we're going to be printed up in an encyclopedia by the name of a man named Bill Ritchie, who he's in Seattle, and he created these miniature etching presses, which I have one, the mini half wood press, and he's publishing us into his encyclopedia, the Young Printmaker Workshop. But my dream for that is to actually sell that off, that whole idea of those workshops for children, because it teaches children about the first computer. It teaches them about, printmaking teaches them about the sciences and the arts combined. And there's so much more involved in that. And so that's pretty exciting. And then the fourth project I have in mind, I mean, we could talk about two different worlds that we have going on right now. We have the metaverse and we have the universe. And the metaverse is so startling and earth-shaking, and it is a virtual world that is going to exist in the future. And to be part of that as an artist, I think that there could be some beta testing with really healing laboratories where people can experience that. So that's something that, through sound and art, that I really have on my mind right now, to think about that in the future and have conversations with the right people, see if we could do something. So
Melissa, you are a creative force.
Yeah,
I have to say. I have to ask you though, what are your passions? We know that you love art, but what are your other passions in your life that make you Melissa Strawser?
My number one passion in my life is being a mother. I think that it is the most challenging, beautiful experience that I feel so blessed with every single day. And so that is my greatest passion. Of course, I have a tremendous love for art. I have an empathy for humankind, and that has developed over the years. And I think that life should just be so highly valued. I think this is such an amazing place where we are. And I think that to serve others and to be a servant to others is, it's a selfless activity, and it's something that I've done my own self-discovery of, when you do acts of caregiving, or you do acts of even being an artist, it's selfless. You're giving so much of yourself, because we need to have these conversations. People need to have conversations. People can heal one another. People can make a difference in other people's lives, and that's very important. One of my greatest passions, and it's something that I really stuck to my whole life, and that is personal development or personal improvement. And I have some masters that I like to follow. I'm fortunate to have Coach Joe Arangio in my life as a strength training coach. I have strength training is my passion. It gets my mind moving in the right directions. The movement of the body is very important to me. I think people like Tony Robbins and Dean Grazioso and all these masters, Shalene Johnson, Jenna Kutcher, I listen to these people, and my newfound favorite passion is marketing, because as an artist, I don't think I even understood what that word even meant. And so I study marketing now, and I try to learn as much about it as I possibly can, because I think that it's such an invitation to invite people into your world to be able to, have this financial freedom of exchanging what you do in exchange for monetizing or, earning a living. And as a mother, that's very important to me, to take care of my child the best that I can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've today, I'm in Indiana and you are in Pennsylvania. The world's getting smaller in so many ways, and yet somehow the distance between everyone seems to grow. You have had influences from England and Germany and Portugal, you said, and then also influences as a Pennsylvania tradition of folk art. How do you at this point describe what a local artist is?
Oh, wow. I love that question, because for me, a local artist could be a teacher teaching art to your child at school. That could be a local artist. A local artist could also be somebody who works within healthcare and is offering, art therapy classes for patients who need healing in many different areas. That's a local artist. A local artist is somebody who really, I think, dives into their community and experiences the culture and gives back to that community. So those are just few of my definitions of a local artist.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you for joining us today on Practical Healthy Living, and I do hope you'll come back and join us again soon.
Thank you so much, Alan, for having me.